Check, 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 check.
Begin Podfix Network transmission. In 3, 2, 1.
Whether you're fly fishing in a stream, getting those ankles wet, or deep in the ocean, casting nets, fish nerds. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. It's a podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Fish Nerds, a show about fish, fishing, and eating fish. I'm Clay Groves, Chief Executive Fish Nerd, Licensed Fishing Guide, your best friend. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. This episode is brought to you by BoatSetter. BoatSetter is the go-to platform for all types of boating experiences, including fishing. You can book fishing charters or guides, including the Fish Nerds Guide Service, or rent boats for your own to go out. All types of boats and charters are available, from bass boats and pontoons to center consoles and offshore sport fishers. Visit boatsetter.com or download the BoatSetter app to plan your next adventure and get 5% off when you book with code FishNerds. And we do appreciate their support. We had a little incident this week where I messed up this deal. I'm going to tell you about that in a minute, but we do really value BoatSetter. Please support them. I'll tell you about that in the middle of the show. It's kind of an interesting story about a guy who makes a podcast in his basement. Tonight, the podcast, speaking of podcasting, we got a good show for you tonight. We have Steve Angers from North Country Angler Fly Shop joining us. I make a trip to his fly shop to talk about what it means to stock hatchery trout over wild brook trout. What does it mean to the fish, and what did he do about it? And of course, we'll talk about his book as well. Then we're joined by Andrew Lewin from Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast. We're going to talk about the horrors of dragging sharks into freshwater rivers and what is the 30 by 30 environmental plan. That's where we're going to protect 30% of the ocean and 30% of land. Is it possible? Is it feasible? What are our opinions? We'll get in deep on that. But first, let's jump right into it with Steve Angers, North Country Angler Fly Shop. Okay, fish nerds, I am so happy, and it's your lucky day because I am taking the podcast on the road. I am in North Conway, New Hampshire at North Country Angler Fly Shop with owner Steve Angers. Steve is author of the Fly Fishing New Hampshire Secret Waters and therefore hated by fishers everywhere. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Clay, how are you? I haven't seen you in a while.
I know, it's been like 2 days. All right, but we'll talk about your book in a little bit because I think people should know about your book. But I want to talk about something else because you came across the news. You were a big deal here in New Hampshire because you did some important brook trout work. Let's talk about that. What'd you do?
Well, New Hampshire is one of those places that has a lot of wild brook trout. And historically, New Hampshire Fish and Game has stocked, if there was water in a stream, they put a stocked trout there. And so one of my missions since returning here to the Valley has been to eliminate that stocking over wild brook trout.
Let me stop you for a second. So a lot of people in New Hampshire fishing up here, they talk about wanting to catch native brookies. I talked to Fish and Game about this, and they said we don't really call them natives anymore. Is that because of the stocking on top of natives?
I think it is because there's no way to know what the genetics are right now. There isn't good history of what the native brook trout genes are. And unless you wanted to go to a bunch of expense to actually start genotyping the brook trout that are wild now, there's no way to really determine whether or not they're native.
Right, they're kind of like mutts. Now, I was fishing up in Maine, and I caught a brook trout on the Kennebec River that didn't look like a brook trout I've seen anywhere. And I talked to a biologist there. He said that's a Kennebec strain of brook trout. And we don't have those individual strains in New Hampshire we can recognize because they're all mutts.
Well, we do have some of those strains.
Where?
I'm not going to tell anybody. That is a true secret water where we do. But like you said, when you're fishing in a water body and you catch a brook trout that looks totally different from anything you're used to seeing, it most likely is its own strain of brook trout.
That's really cool. So anyway, so you went to Fish and Game, to a lot of meetings to make a case to slow down or stop the stocking of hatchery fish on top of the wild fish. What was that process like?
Well, anybody that's done anything with bureaucracies knows that there are always people that are calling and complaining about something. And I didn't take the approach of going to the New Hampshire Fish and Game Commission meetings and complaining. I took the position that I am here to help make things better.
So more like building an idea from the bottom up, trying to bring people with you as opposed to causing a contrast or going against the grain.
Right. I mean, it's just human nature that when somebody comes after you and after your position is to put up your guard and to block all incoming bombs, so to speak. And my experience, having done this type of work for 25 years, is you get a lot more done by collaborating than you do by confrontation.
Yeah, it's totally true. Okay, so you built this kind of collaboration. Tell me about like your first meeting. What was the outcome there? What happened?
Basically, Fish and Game laughed in my face and said, "We'll see."
Right, and the Fish and Game in New Hampshire, we are not well supported with tax dollars. So Fish and Game is funded through fishing taxes, through buying your license, and there's a hidden tax on all the fishing gear we buy in the state of New Hampshire. So their incentive to get fish everywhere you fish, to get trout specifically everywhere you fish, is pretty high because they want to sell fishing licenses and gear, right?
Right, correct. But the position that we took was there is a growing number of anglers that want to fish for wild brook trout, and because of the increased demand on water bodies, the state, because of economics, can't produce enough trout to meet the demand in the high traffic areas. So our position was take these trout from the low traffic areas and move them to the high traffic areas, and then let the wild trout do their thing.
Right, because you can take the most popular fishing spots and put all those trout there, keep the anglers happy, and then those who want to go out and drive up into the White Mountains somewhere to that secret trout water, they can go there and get that wild fish and be happy that they bought your book.
Absolutely. I don't know if we're segueing to the book yet or not, but yeah, it's true. I have to say that probably a third of the folks that come into the shop, their first question out of their mouth is, where do I go to catch a wild brook trout? Mm-hmm. So it definitely is a growing thing. But conversely, since I've added some spin fishing gear to the shop, I also get a lot of regular anglers. And so part of the collaboration versus confrontation is to do something for all trout anglers, not just fly trout anglers or tenkara trout anglers, but to make sure that it's satisfactory for everyone that wants to catch a trout.
Right, and the beauty of this whole thing is the wild trout is one more, it can be used for marketing. You know, so like, great, you can go catch all those stocky brookies anywhere you want, have a great time, we want you to do that. But then when they get good at that, now the level up challenge happens. Okay, now you go for the boss man, let me tell you how to catch a wild fish. And now people are going to buy more gear, they're going to spend more money, they're going to drive more, they can book hotels, they're going to go camping. All that drives the fishing economy. Exactly.
And the fishing economy is something that I think the state of New Hampshire has only begun to tap because the average fly rod is $500.
That is bonkers. That is so insanity to me. But people do it and they're happy to do it.
Yep, they do. And so, anglers have money. They have money to spend. They aren't going to Walmart, buying a $6 tube and a 30-pack of Bud Lights and hitting the river.
Some are.
I guess I should watch the generalizations, but your average angler, even if he wants to go to Walmart, not North Country Angler, if he's going to buy a rod, a tackle box, some fishing lures, some hooks, some bobbers, you can't get out of there for less than $100.
No, and that's true. And you'll see that this year, especially because of last year, there's a shortage in fishing gear. That shortage is still out there, and so people are spending more. But now the niche market, private fly shops like yours, have tons of gear.
Well, I wouldn't say that's necessarily true.
All the gear.
We have gear, but there's still shortages.
Yeah.
There are still shortages, and I've had to be a little proactive. I've bought 3 times as many fly rods as I normally buy this time of year, just to have product for when people come up here to fish.
Right. And this year is going to be, last year was a really busy summer for New Hampshire because of COVID-19. People who usually traveled overseas or flew on vacations took a ride up here from the Boston area to go fishing, go on vacation, spend their money. People who had vacation properties here stayed home for the most part. So we had different people visiting us. This summer, we know for sure outside activity is safe. Vaccine numbers are way up in New England especially. We're doing great getting people vaccinated. And people who came last year for the first time might come back. So we anticipate New Hampshire to be insane this year for anglers.
Exactly. And I mean, I've heard more talk about bass. There have been some giant bass caught in the ponds here south of the valley, over in the lakes region. So you don't have to be a trout angler to come to New Hampshire and enjoy the opportunities that we have, because they're across the board.
Right. I'm going to cycle back to this Brook Trout conversation. Right?
Okay.
Your first meeting, they laughed at you. You went to a bunch of meetings. How long did this take?
I started going to Fish and Game Commission meetings in July of 2017, so almost 4 years.
So that's a really slow roll. They describe bureaucracy as like steering a train. It really, nothing happens fast. So let's say your first one, they laughed at you. 2 years in, were they starting to come around?
Oh yeah, 2 years in, we were having PowerPoint presentations with the Inland Fisheries Department, and we, by the way, when I say we, that's Trout Unlimited. Trout Unlimited has spearheaded this change in trout management. So, 2 years in, we got PowerPoint presentations, and we got the old, oh, interesting. And, as happens a lot, I've learned, as happens a lot in life, sometimes you have to make your idea their idea.
Right. You must be married.
I am.
That's your basic marital advice right there. Make it their idea. So that's really great. So now that's 2 years in. People are starting to come along. They're getting on board. No big changes have happened yet, but they're starting to get it. Now, was it 2 weeks ago this all fell together for you?
Well, no, the big change was there was a change in leadership. The executive director's contract ran out, and a new executive director was hired. And the old executive director was very hatchery focused, and the new executive director is very angler focused.
Interesting. And you see a new person come in, and you go, new blood, right? Because you're like a vampire.
Well, on one side, yes, but on the other side, it's, oh no, are we going back to square one?
Oh, because you don't know the history of that person until you meet them. And it turns out they were angler focused, and that means they were more receptive to what you were pitching.
Correct. So that whole thing has been a super positive process. Glad to have a new executive director, Scott Mason, super guy, wants to do what's right by the angling community and the hunting community. So, it's just a breath of fresh air there.
That's good.
Diane Timmons, who's our cold water fisheries biologist, just started cranking out the numbers, and everything that was done scientifically.
I think having a database science approach always helps, because the fuzzy, we love our fish, that gets people to like attention, but doesn't get people to make a move.
Right, and so, I don't want to insult Doc Martin, so you can check with her and have her correct me, but there's GIS programs that actually classify watersheds, cold water, mixed, which is cold water part of the year, warm water part of the year, and then warm water all year round. And Diane was able to work those databases to get an even clearer picture of water that was good for wild trout, water that was good for brook trout, and then water that's good for our rainbow trout and brown trout. So not only is where fish are being planted being massaged, but the type of fish that's being planted was also massaged using scientific data.
Well, that's good, because New Hampshire's history of stocking fish, not just trout, is all over the place. I mean, there's the history of New Hampshire. I mean, they've thrown Chinook salmon in Lake Winnipesaukee, and they just throw these fish in and watch them all die, and then that's our history. That's our soul. So that's our roots. So that's really good. So all this happened, and then tell me about the vote to make the change. What did that feel like?
So Diane did the presentation to the Fish and Game Commission and had them ask their questions. Obviously some people that have been going to Little Brook XYZ for the last 30 years and catching a handful of stock trout aren't happy about it because now stream XYZ is actually classified as a wild brook trout stream. But there was very little of that. And it's not so much that things that are changed in fisheries have to be voted on by the commission, but, fishing is still a social activity. And so you have to make sure that the masses, the angling masses, aren't going to rise up against what these new scientific-based decisions are. And it was great to see that the commissioners all understood and all bought into the program, and not one of them said, "Oh no, you're not doing that in my county." So I think it's an upswell. I think anglers have learned, especially over COVID, where they had a lot more time to check waters out, to see what was available, to learn about what the opportunities are in New Hampshire. Everything's timing, and the timing is just right.
And you did it. Congratulations. That's great news. So now they'll be changing how they stock fish, taking a more careful approach, and there'll be less stocking on top of wild fish. Now, there's no process for moving already stocked fish that are there. Those guys get to stay and be caught or become wild, right?
Right. Well, when it comes to the majority of the stocked fish, again, they're grown for anglers to come and catch and take home. They're not grown to actually survive in the wild. So I'm not saying that there aren't stock trout that hold over and become bigger, but it's a minuscule number. It's a very small number because most of those fish are grown to last one fishing season.
Okay, segue time. Because you also, Steve Angers from North Country Angler Fly Shop, you also wrote a book called Fly Fishing New Hampshire's Secret Waters, which is all the waters that no one's supposed to know about. But now in your book, you've got the coordinates of every fish in the state. How's this been going?
The sales have been great. People have really enjoyed the book. I had one guy email me and say that he went to one of the ponds in the book and had never caught. He'd been fishing New Hampshire for 50 years and had never caught as big a trout as he caught in one of the secret waters. So that's the good news. I mean, it's kind of a ha-ha thing. The book's called Secret Waters because that's a series of books that's being put out by the History Press. And so when they called me to ask me to write the book, I told them that there were no secret waters in New Hampshire, but they said that didn't really matter.
Well, everything's a secret until you know about it, right? So there are a lot of people who don't know all the spots in here. So to them, it's a secret, right? So that's how that works. But so does this, I haven't read the books because I'm not a very good friend. But so this has the waters. Does it have any tips, tricks? What's in there? What's the content?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I start with I intersperse the book with little tales of my fishing escapades through the years. And the beginning of the book does talk about the techniques, the flies, the equipment that you need, whether you're fishing moving water or still water. So, just to give you all the basics before we get into exactly what waters you want to go to and how to approach those waters to be successful.
All right, so I'm going to ask you two more questions. This is not quite book related, but people can get the book at your website, northcountryangler.com. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask you two questions. Mm-hmm. In the ponds, in June, it's early June, mm-hmm. Water's like 60 degrees, mm-hmm. Number one fly people are using right now?
Right now they are using a Hendrickson emerger.
What does that even mean?
So the Hendrickson is one of our popular mayflies here in the valley, and the emerger is the one that gets stuck in the surface film trying to break out of its shuck so it can expand its wings and fly up in the air and mate.
So if they see a bug about to pop out of the surface of the water, and they go, I'm going to eat it before it gets a chance to reproduce.
Exactly, and it's usually a big splash when the fish does that.
Right, and we know that fish have notoriously bad aim, so that's a fun fly to fish because they're going to be splashing around your fly and missing it, but all that just excites you for that next cast and get out there.
Right, you see that splash, and you throw your emerger right next to the splash, and they'll circle right back and take it.
Right, because they're hungry, and they're going to eat emerger after emerger, so get yours out there. Okay, so next question. So that's ponds. Mm-hmm. Okay, now we're talking rivers. Number one fly right now in a clear water stream in New Hampshire.
I go with the Copper John.
Or describe a copper john to me.
Okay, so a Copper John has a body that's made with copper wire. The original Copper John was made just with that copper-colored wire, but they're now also available in red, in green, in chartreuse, in blue, in orange. And so there's a wide variety of colors of Copper Johns that you can use in the cold water streams right now. And the reason they're so effective is our bug life is just waking up, and so those fish are looking for these nymphs to crawl up on the rocks before they swim up through the water column to hatch.
Perfect. Yes, because I'd be just throwing mop flies all day. So good to know there's some other choice out there. Steve Angers from North Country Angler Fly Shop. His book, Fly Fishing New Hampshire's Secret Waters, available at northcountryangler.com. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Clay. Good to see you, and stop by the shop anytime.
I just may. All right. Thanks so much, Steve. Appreciate your time today. And now let's get back into it with another ad from Boat Setter. Do you own a boat? Do you want to make money from your boat? Boat Setter is the go-to platform for all types of boating experience, including fishing. It's also a way for charters to grow their business or for boat owners to rent out their boats to make money. And we like money. If you sign up to list your boat for rent or charters, tell Boat Setter that Fish Nerds sent you, and their team will send you a free swag package when your boat listing is complete. Visit boatsetter.com or download the Boat Setter app to plan your next adventure and get 5% off when you book with the code FishNerds. That means your boat can make you money when you're not using it. Now, let me tell you the story about how I almost ruined my deal here with Boat Setter, and they've been very generous and kind with me. So we use MailChimp as our mail client, and we have an email list on there. And I don't touch it. For years, I've had it set up so when our podcast goes out, the RSS feed travels through the magic of space and time and into the MailChimp's bananas. The MailChimp eats the bananas, and it poops out a email to you to tell you a new podcast is out. That list had 5,000 people on it, and I was pretty happy to see that number. But I've never looked at a single name on the list. I didn't see any reason to do that because I didn't actively run email campaigns. I just did a weekly RSS feed. But the deal I had with Boat Setter was to send out an email blast with all kinds of stuff for the listeners to grab onto. And I did that, and then I noticed, and then Boat Setter also noticed, that of those 5,000 emailers, like 4,700 of them were what's called a spam bot. So they were all fake emails from China and from the Philippines, faking out my account. So what I sold Boat Setter for an advertising package was not accurate. So we've worked out the details. We figured it all out, and they've been very, very generous, and I really do appreciate them. And they're literally the only people who have been on my show before who have done really well and come back to us, and I do value that and appreciate it. And I couldn't thank them enough. They used to be the two guys I deal with used to run Fisher Guiding, and then they got acquired by Boat Setter. You've heard them on the show a few weeks ago, and they're doing really well. I'm really proud of those guys. So boatsetter.com, thank them for supporting the Fish Nerds. We do appreciate it. And I'm just a guy in my basement working things out and making mistakes, and they get it, and I appreciate that. Boatsetter.com, use the code FishNerds, and save 5% off. Let's get into it with Andrew Lewin and Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast right now.
You ready to talk about oceans?
No.
No, we're just not going to talk. We're going to talk
Hell
about
no.
land.
Yeah, I'm done. I'm talking about sand. Let's talk about composting.
Sand.
Yeah.
Hey, I've done that before on this podcast, and don't worry about that. We've done that before. But welcome back. It's been a while since we've had you back. Last week you were like completely booked, and I'm a last minute booker, and you were completely booked. And you told me, you're like, look, if I want to keep the wife happy, I can't do interviews every night. And I had an interview done. Like you were doing an interview every night, or some kind of podcasting every night.
You know how it goes.
That's
like
kind of crazy.
Andrew, people say to you, like you make a podcast where you do 3 week now.
3 a week, yeah.
So and people ask you, how do you not run out of content? And the truth is, there's no end to content when you're talking fish, fisheries, oceans, it doesn't run out. There's a never-ending stream of things to talk about, and so many people who want to talk about it. So it just goes on. I have more content than I can produce right now. I'm sitting on hours and hours of audio that I have no time to edit. Yeah, it's a good problem. Yeah,
it's a good problem to have, but it's also, I see how it gets overwhelming too. As someone who's edited a lot of podcasts, once it gets ahead of you, you're just like, oh my God, I have hours and hours and hours worth of editing to do. And I just don't have the time to edit. Right. That's where it becomes that's where it becomes the problem.
I know. And now I've got a full-time job.
Nice problem to have.
Yeah. Now I've got a job and
that's
I gotta
right.
work.
Congratulations. But this is big, because this job, you got this job because of podcasting. So why don't you, I know this is not an episode about podcasting, but let people know in the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue audience what you are doing right now.
Well, so I've been podcasting, since 2012 or 13.
Right.
And a couple of years ago, the local radio station up here needed a voice guy, and they knew me, they knew about me, and they cold called me one day and recruited me to be what's called a utility person at the radio station, which means I was working on 3 radio stations doing voice work and audio editing. And it was part-time. I was on air a lot, but not live very often. Mostly just pre-recording stuff. And then 2 weeks ago, I got offered a full-time utility gig, same job I was doing, but just like a lot more work, which I accepted. And then before I even got a chance to get into the full-time start date, we have a local radio station here called Magic 104, which is the #1 morning radio show in the whole state of New Hampshire, where I live. And the DJ quit because he got recruited by another bigger station, and I got offered his job. So now I am program director and Magic Morning live DJ, the drive time DJ, the Yuck It Up guy on the radio from 6 to 9 a.m. every day.
Love it.
And it's top 40 music. So it's like music I don't know well. Dua Lipa and Lil Nas X and SZA and Billie Eilish and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So I've got to learn to appreciate music I avoided for a long time.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think it's bad music. It's just music I don't know. So,
do your kids listen to that music?
No.
Do my kids listen to that type of music?
Yeah, mine are like classic rock kids. I can't even.
Right.
And they get mad when I turn music up too loud. I'm like, you guys are such squares. I raised the most square kids on the planet. Turn it down, Dad. Neighbors are gonna complain. I'm like, but it's a great song.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Oh man. Top 40, like on my Alexa in my kitchen, is always playing. Although my kids are getting more into like the old school hip hop, because that's what my wife and I listen to, and then reggae and.
When you say old school hip hop, tell me what you mean.
Yeah.
Give me names some.
Well, for them it's 90s.
Oh,
hip-hop,
look at you.
But for me, it's like
Going back
early 80s.
to like Run DMC and Dougie Fresh and the Get Fresh crew and all that.
Yes, LL Cool J.
LL Cool J.
Beastie
This
Boys.
LL Cool J this week inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Oh, he deserves it. I love that guy.
Yeah,
I watch
great.
NCIS Los Angeles because of him. I think he's one of the best guys in the world. But anyway, I'm so happy you got that job, because it's always interesting, because when I started podcasting, I've had so many opportunities, including like TV shows, because of my podcast. And there's a mutual friend of ours and a great podcaster named Dave Jackson, who talks about podcasting all the time, but he has a sort of I guess a segment in his podcast where it's like, because of my podcast, I've had all these opportunities. And you hear everybody have these opportunities, but it's really nice when one of my good friends who does podcasting is able to get a full-time job doing like the morning show. I think a lot of people love to do that. And I look forward to hearing more about it, because you just started this week. So you're still in training, I guess. It's a lot of work, I would imagine. It's
weird. It's a lot. It feels like sciencing, because I have to mine the charts for data to find out what music they're playing around the country, keep a spreadsheet of what's being played, and I determine the top 40 songs for our region based on all this data. So I have to work with so it feels like sciencing. And in a lot of ways it is, and knowing what people are going to
database management, basically.
It is, and knowing what people are going to want to listen to, and tracking it, and it's a lot of science. So yeah.
So are you now? I have to admit, you are the chief fish operator at Fish Nerds Podcast. Is there going to be fishing news on your radio show?
Well, it might sound like this.
News, fish in the news. Everybody loves their fish in the news.
Everybody loves the fish in the news. Of course there will be.
I love that song.
Yeah.
I love that song. It's such a fun song. You got to put that on the air. I think people will love that.
Oh, I think
mean,
I
you're
will.
in New Hampshire. People
Yeah.
must love fishing in New Hampshire, right?
Well, yeah, and everyone knows because I talk on the radio. You know, even on my voice work I do, I always sneak in a fish story every day. So people know.
course.
People know. We have another
Yeah.
DJ who skis all the time. He always talks skiing. It's okay. You just be yourself. People like to know who you are. They don't want you to pretend to
Yeah.
be somebody else. So I like to fish and talk about fish. So
Agreed.
I'll do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I also love talking about Kanye West too, and that's genuine.
Of course.
So I'm happy to do
If
that
you could
too.
just meld them together, I think that would be awesome.
Invite Kanye to
Look,
go
if you
fishing.
need someone to, yeah, fishing with Kanye.
Yeah.
If you need a marine biologist on your show, just let me know. I can get up early and we can be on the air together.
I'll have you on. There's lots to talk about.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, let's do it. It'll be
Of course,
fun.
there's lots
It'll be great.
I know top 40 too. I can maybe not this top 40. I don't know. These days I don't know all my top 40.
You'll work it out. It's not that complicated. There's like five artists.
I do know pop culture though. I watch a lot of pop culture stuff.
All right.
That's like my guilty pleasure. But anyway, we're here to actually talk about oceans because Ocean
Oceans.
Talk Friday.
Yes.
And what we usually do is we pick a story. We don't tell each other what the story is beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of surprise each other and get each other's takes on each story. So we're going to have two stories. We're going to start with yours.
Okay.
What is your story that you brought today?
Well, I want to talk about this viral photo of a Tampa Bay man who had a tiger shark that he dragged up a river. And it's kind of an important conversation to have. And, you know, you can, it almost looks fake, the photo.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen the photo yet, just Google Florida man, tiger shark in a river. And it's a picture that's like, it's like a teenage kid holding,
young, isn't he?
Yeah, holding like a 6 or 7 foot tiger shark in a river with lots of canoers and kayakers in his background taking photos. And it's a viral photo of a tiger shark that launched an investigation from Florida's Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission. The FWC issued notices to appear in court for 2 men following the incident that happened on Saturday in the Chasowitska River. I can't even say it, involving a tiger shark with a rope around its tail. So they tied a rope around its tail and dragged it upstream. According to the publication, this is the Citrus County Chronicle. According to the publication, the 2 men who have not been identified dragged the shark at least 4 miles upstream for a photo op. One of the photos showing a Lutz resident, Joseph Wilson, dramatically holding the tiger shark has gone viral. Wilson told the Chronicle that him and his friends were just hanging. That's not a quote. It's got bad English. But anyway, that him and his friends were just hanging out at the head of the springs when the boat showed up with the shark. So the kid with the picture is not the one who dragged the shark upstream. He just wanted to get one.
Right.
I've never seen one
He
before.
just wanted to get a picture with it.
Here's the quote. I've never seen one before, said Wilson. He had a rope tied to his tail, and it was still in the water. I said, can I take a picture of it? And he said, sure. I probably picked it up for about 10 seconds and then put it back in the water. Another onlooker at the springs told Fox 13 that crowds of people were gathering around to take photographs with the shark. So it was calm and everyone was doing it. And all the onlookers started photographing the shark. This is the words in the article.
Oh, wow.
Florida. And started tormenting it, holding it in different positions and taking photos. So yeah, that's the game here. And so what do you do about stuff like this? This kid's in trouble. People who drag the shark upstream should be in trouble. How do you prevent this kind of behavior?
Well, I mean, this is the thing. We've seen this happen actually before. I'm not sure if you remember, but a couple of years ago, I covered it on the podcast where we talked about these kids. Again, it was like young adults.
Yeah, we say kids. We're talking 22-year-olds. Yeah,
they're talking 22-year-olds. They're kids to us. But they would catch a shark and they would tie it to the end of their boat and they would go like at high speeds and the shark would be basically popping off the top of the sea surface. And they would put up photos on Instagram and so forth. And of course they got charged, and not only they got charged, but they got threatened. They had to have security at their house and people were protesting outside their house and they're getting death threats and so forth. They kind of did it to themselves by posting the pictures thinking this is awesome. I mean, first of all, this is what I think. The guy holding the tiger shark, not a smart thing to do. Like, it's a tiger shark. They
Right.
have razor sharp teeth, you
Right.
know, and this is a good 5-footer, maybe 8 feet.
Yeah.
Is that, did they say how long it was? I think it looks to be about 5 to 8 feet.
Yeah, it's probably 5 or 6 feet long. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a big mouth. That's a good sized mouth on a tiger that could essentially bite a couple fingers off, if not a hand, if you get it stuck in the wrong place. So not a good thing to do if it was, especially if it was still alive.
Yeah.
Also bringing it into fresh water, not a smart thing to do. You're tormenting the shark. I mean, just from an ethical point of view, it's just not a smart thing to do.
No.
There's nothing smart about this.
No, there's nothing. And like I get the instinct. I think it has a lot to do with our modern Facebook, Instagram culture, right? Everyone's
Right.
searching for that like and that viral picture. And there's something in the pleasure center of our brain that goes off, it fires off when we get a like on Facebook. And I think everyone's driven to that for some reason. There's no financial gain, there's no profit, there's nothing but a computerized thumbs up that does something to our brains. And I think that's all it is. And it's really unfortunate because, you know, humans aren't good to animals as a rule, especially sharks. We're not known for being good shark caretakers. The good news is, though, on the Facebook that this went viral on, the page it went viral on, almost all the comments were negative. Like, what the hell are you doing? Which is positive.
Yeah.
That's good because
People who had common sense commented, basically.
Yeah. Well, I you know, Andrew, I actually don't like to use the phrase common sense ever because it doesn't mean anything. Like
it's not common. Common sense isn't common anymore.
Well, because it doesn't mean anything. What's common sense regionally doesn't make any sense. You know, that whole region of Florida, it could be common sense. When you see a shark, you kill it and drag it upstream. That might be what they all do in that region of the Susquehanna River or whatever. So I hate to use the phrase common sense because your common sense is very different than mine.
True.
But just don't be a jerk.
Well, and I think what this does too is, like, you're right. Like, I think a lot of people, there's a little bit of a competition on photos on any kind of social media, right? Like, you can't just get away with just posting photos of your family or your dog or your cat or your pet of some sort. You want to make a big splash. It's almost like now, you know, I don't know if you've noticed, but in comedy now, the shock comedy is the dominant comedy because it really exudes this or extracts this really big reaction, right?
Yeah.
So on social media, when you come across a picture like this, where someone's holding a 5 to 6 foot tiger shark, you're like, wow, like this is crazy. But it also kind of exposes, you're right, the ethics of people in different regions of what they think is okay for animals and what they don't think is okay. And I think it really exposes sort of a lot of people's thought process and be like, it's actually like this kid thought it's actually okay to pick up this tiger shark and show it to get a picture with it and post it online. He actually thought there was, not from a legal standpoint, but just from an ethical standpoint, he actually thought that this was okay.
Right. Well, the truth is a 20-something-year-old kid like that, they're still in adolescence. So the way you're thinking doesn't make any sense to them because they're 22 years old. And the other thing is that you get groupthink. So you have all these people, lots of them are picking the shark up and taking pictures. Well, if those guys are doing it, I need my picture too. I don't want to be left out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it always shocks me. Like it surprises me, it surprises me, but doesn't shock me when I see things like this. It disappoints me huge because I'm like, there were a number of people who thought this was right. Like there's a person behind in the canoe with a family who's taking a picture of this guy holding the shark. So he's like, instead of, maybe that guy said something, maybe he didn't. But they took a picture to be like, look at this guy. He's actually doing this kind of thing. Right. Obviously they're kayaking in what looks to be like an estuary. So they think, oh, it's really, you don't really see tiger sharks in estuaries because you don't. But then there's the fact that somebody dragged this up and tortured this animal going through, fresher water as they went upstream and making it even worse.
4 miles.
Right. That is torturous.
And there's probably zero chance that shark survived.
Oh yeah, no, there's no way that sharks.
Yeah, I know tiger sharks
being held out of the water.
Yeah, I know tiger sharks can handle fresh water, but not like that.
Yeah, not that much.
Yeah.
Not that I know. I don't
Was
know
it
if they
tiger?
can handle.
There's been some sightings of bull sharks. I stand corrected. Then yeah, they're screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially, like that thing is being tortured with fresher water, and so its whole physiology is going to be thrown off.
All right, even look at the
and
picture.
If I'm wrong,
even look at the picture.
sorry, I was going to say if I'm wrong, I'm sure my shark enthusiasts that are watching, that are listening, will be able to tell me if I'm wrong or not.
Yeah,
sorry, what were you saying?
And it's weird too. Like you don't really think about sharks. You think about like if you saw a cat that was injured, you would recognize pain in that animal. If you've
Right.
But looking at this picture shark, I can recognize the pain in this animal. It looks in pain. It shows
not happy.
It doesn't look like a, yeah. I wasn't going to anthropomorphize. I was letting you do that because you're the scientist. So, but
it's unemotionally It's emotionally unavailable right now.
That's right. Yeah, it's like I don't. Hey guys, I don't think I like this very much. Yeah, poor shark. I feel terrible for it, and the people who did this have killed other sharks.
Absolutely.
This is what they do.
This is not the first time this has happened. This is the first time they've been, quote unquote, caught with it. Or maybe, who knows? Like the last people who got charged that I covered a couple of years ago, they had multiple incidences on their page. The ones that went viral were just the ones that caught on.
Yep.
And so I think that's where it becomes, a real problem. And this is where like the punishment comes in. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times the punishment doesn't necessarily fit the crime, where it won't deter them from either doing it again or other people from doing it, where it's either jail time or the fines are in the tens of thousands of dollars to really make an impact, to say, like, even if they say, well, I didn't know about this law. Well, you better know about it if you're dealing with sharks, because it's a $20,000 or $25,000 fine. That's a big fine to me that would bankrupt me if I had to pay that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I would think twice if I had to do that stuff.
So you're saying it's the fact this photo went viral might be a positive thing long run, because then maybe it creates an awareness of like, you do this, you are totally screwed.
Yeah, I mean, maybe for the people who would think that this was okay in the first place, knowing that, the more that this story gets out, then they would be like, oh, okay. But the people who are commenting, this is wrong, this isn't right, they know, like, if they come across it, first of all, most people who come across a shark aren't going to pick it up. Whether it's alive or dead, usually they won't pick it up. There's some special people out there that would decide to pick it up. And so I think it's already a small part of the population, but obviously there's more than we think. I think that more than I would like to know.
Yeah.
That actually do that kind of stuff.
Now, have you ever come across anyone mishandling a shark?
Not in person.
I have.
Oh yeah.
When my kids were little, we were in Florida. We were in Folly Beach, South Carolina, and we were walking on the fishing pier, and someone had, I think it was a young tiger shark on the dock. They had caught it fishing for, flounder, whatever fish they were catching out there. It wasn't flounder, but they caught a small one. It was probably 3 feet long. And they had reeled it up, and it's like a 30-foot drop. They had cranked it all the way up to the dock, and they were struggling to get the hook out of the mouth. They were just wrangling this poor shark's face with the hook. My daughter at the time, Zoe, I think she was 10 years old. And she said, Dad, can you make them stop hurting that shark?
Right.
And I went up to them. I said, boys, what do you got? Their kids are like, 18-year-old kids. And like, we can't get the hook out of the shark. So I took my knife out of my pocket and I cut the line and I put the shark back in the water. I said, problem solved.
Right.
And they said, but the hook. I said, I don't care about your hook. The shark needs to go back in the water. You guys are going to kill that thing. It swam away. It seemed to be okay. But I just didn't even ask. Well, I just took my knife out and I just acted. And I
right.
And afterwards,
and you did the right thing.
And afterwards, those kids and I went fishing together. We talked and we fished together. And they actually were thankful because they didn't know what to do. They were trying, but the idea of just cutting a line didn't occur to them because their common sense was different than my common sense. And my common sense,
and that makes
my common sense says get that fish back in the water. Who cares about your hook?
Right.
Yeah, and it didn't swallow.
I get that.
Yeah.
No, and it'll eventually rust off and it'll fall off. And actually, there's a shark lab in University of Miami that actually talked about hammerhead sharks. They actually got their research actually got hammerhead sharks protected within Florida waters, and they were saying that the stress that hammerhead sharks actually go through when being caught can actually kill them.
Oh, sure.
And so the best thing to do is just cut the line once you realize that you have a hammerhead on the line. Cut the line. You can leave the hook in, because not having that stress of being caught and fighting a fishing line is better for them than actually trying to get the hook out and putting them through more stress. So there's more likelihood that they're going to survive. The hook will eventually rust out, fall off, and then they'll be okay after a while.
Yeah, they'll be fine. And I've actually seen, not sharks, but I've seen lots of fish pass fishing hooks. Like there's.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I once caught a fish that had a piece of fishing line hanging out of its butt. I pulled on it, and on the end of the line was a half rusted out hook. So it was gut hooked, and the fisher person had the foresight to cut the line rather than battle a hook out of a fish, and the fish was fine.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's my recommendation. Anytime you foul hook a fish, cut the line, or if you struggle to get the hook out of the fish's mouth, cut the line. Just put the fish back in the water, and there's been some studies done on pike where they've measured how long it takes them to get hooks out of their own mouth. Pike can actually get a hook out of their own faces. So, and I can't remember the data
crazy.
on that, but they measured it with treble hooks. Yeah. So the animals know their bodies and they can figure stuff out. Get them in the water. That's it. Just
absolutely
stop it anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah,
well, this was an interesting story. Definitely, you don't want to see people doing this. If you do see people doing this, highlight it on social media, make it go viral as much as possible, but also report it to like Fish and Wildlife Commission or whoever is in that country's authority. Try and figure out where it's from, and usually they're able to find out who it is, where it's from, because people put their pictures right on there. That's what always makes me laugh.
Oh, I see it all the time on fishing pages. You'll see people post illegal bag limits, and I comment under them. You know that you're not anonymous here, and you've broken the law. And then I get, oh, you're a Debbie Downer. Don't be such a narc. I'm like, I'm not narking. You told on yourself.
Yeah.
you outed yourself, dude. Yeah.
I saw people that went, for here in Canada with the whole COVID thing, if you go across the border and you come back, you have to quarantine in a hotel. If you don't, you can get a fine, like a $3,000 fine. There were people who put it on TikTok that they were walking across the border and that they just got into the car and they went home. But they put it all on video. So if anybody wanted to catch them, they could catch them. So I love people like that. They make it so much easier to get a hold of them. But anyway, thanks for that. That was an awesome one. The second story that I brought is actually really not a story, but it's just something that we've been talking about every once in a while on the podcast. And that is protecting 30% of land and ocean by 2030. So it's the 30 by 30 concept. People have been hearing about it. It's really catchy. A lot of international organizations have kind of caught on to it and really rallied around it. It's the decade of the ocean right now, so it's really a focus to protect 30% of the ocean. Conservation the Convention on Biological Diversity (CBD) is all about the protect 20% of land, 30% of land, 30% of water or oceans by 2030. So all these dates, 30 by 30 is everywhere. Even the Blue Nature Alliance, which I had on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, is all about protecting 30% of the ocean it's contributing to that protection by protecting up to 5% of the global ocean by then. And they're all great targets. When I first started in my career, Clay, we were talking about protecting 20% was the optimal. 30% was the goal, and now it seems to be 30% is the optimal. But the thing that I still am a little skeptical is this, the UN's behind it, IUCN's behind it, all the big organizations are behind it and trying to focus to that. But my question to you, because I find you are a little bit more of a realist, a little bit more of a pragmatist. Like you just think about these things and you just kind of you play a little bit devil's advocate. So I want to ask you, do you think 30 by 30 is realistic?
You're talking globally, right?
Globally, yeah.
Well, how much of the ocean is already protected?
Right now, fully protected is less than 5%.
And what does protected mean?
Protected means if you have an area, no extractive disturbance. So no fishing, no oil and gas, no deep sea mining, anything that would extract, resources from that area.
Right. Now, is it reasonable to assume, given the vastness of our ocean, that there is 30% of the ocean not being touched at any given time?
It's a good question.
I would bet there is because the ocean's big.
It's huge. It's
Well,
70%
you must have learned that in
70%.
college when you were going to biology school, and the big how big is the ocean, and I think that I think the ocean reasonably 30% is not crazy because we can't use the whole ocean. It's just too much ocean.
Right.
That leaves a lot of ocean left to use, and I would bet. But the problem is we could easily protect parts of the ocean we don't want to use, so we can call it done, right? You can go out in the mid-Atlantic, in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, where there's very few things ever happening, and carve out a big section and call that protected. But who cares? Because it's not a spot anyone wants to harvest from anyway, or we want to drill from anyway because it's far too deep or far too far away from anything. So it depends on how you're defining protecting. Most people, when they're talking about conservation, this like lay people, I'm not a scientist, they're talking about almost like inland waters or shoreline areas or places where most of the animals and diversity is going to be, the things we see. So I think if the goal is to protect stuff near shore, it's harder. And then on land,
right.
30% is an awful big ask. Canada probably could do it.
Right.
The United States, I don't know how much conservation land we have here in the United States already. I bet we've got.
Yeah, I don't know the whole percentage.
Yeah, let's see how
but
much.
It's still you still have a lot of green space.
Well, we do plenty of room.
Yeah, even like not just green space, but like desert. You've got you got a lot of northern states that are not highly populated and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so 12%. 12% of the United States currently is protected.
Right.
So we're doing pretty 12%. That's not bad. I don't know how that compares to the rest of the world, but that's almost gets us halfway there. So the question is, could the United States? I can't speak for the world. I can, I'm a stupid American. I don't know any other countries' names. But could the United States get to 30%? I think we probably could, without a whole lot more work, because we have those. Half of Maine is forested. It's not protected, but it's forested, and you got out in the middle of the country. There's miles and miles and miles and acres of nothing. Right. Miles are like kilometers, only different. In case.
Only weird.
Only impossible.
Like but weird.
Only impossible to do math with. That's all.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't think it's impossible, but it's when I taught college for a while, and we talked about goal setting. And we talked about setting SMART goals. And the second part of SMART goal, the third part, so the A part means achievable, right? And I think 30 by 30 is not achievable in the short term. And it's one of those goals that, because it's so big, it feels impossible. If we said, let's do 15%, and we're already at 12, well, sure,
feels more
we can add 3 more on. It doesn't impact. Okay, now we're at 12.
Right.
Can we get to? We're at 15. Can we get to 20? Sure, no problem. And just incrementally increase those goals. So when you set that 30 by 30 thing, it sounds great. It ain't gonna happen because humans can't think that way. We need to think small chunks. We'll get there.
Well, and ideally, that's the way they tried to do it in the past. It's just you have different governments that come in. They have different priorities. It's the same thing with climate change, like reducing greenhouse gases. Now we're always at let's get below 1990 levels. But as we get further and further away from 1990, the target almost seems not achievable. As we're trying to hit 1990, then it's like, oh, let's just hit 2000. Right. Levels of 2000, or let's hit levels of 2010.
But if you set those smaller goals up ahead of time rather than lofty goals, then you celebrate success, and that success will feed those pleasure parts of our brain and motivate us to do more. If you say, let's reach 1990 goals for climate, and we can't get there in the 10 years we gave ourselves, that failure demotivates the whole process, and it pushes people away from it. Whereas if you say, hey, let's get to 2015, well, we can do that, and that feels good, and then, well, now we can do 5 more,
Now we can do more. Yeah. I'm a little bit more pessimistic on the idea. And the reason why
You're so rarely pessimistic. I like this.
I know, right? I'm the optimist usually, but when I've seen this happen before, in Canada, I've seen it happen before, and it takes the right government with the right promise and to be able to put it together. And you know, the government we have now has actually increased our protected area within our 200 nautical mile zone, our exclusive economic zone, EEZ. And so like in Canada, we've actually increased from like just over 1% to about 15% protected area. And we're moving even more. I think we're closer to 20% now. And then we're going to try and even build. So now it's getting a little bit more. And I think the US is again, a little the same, but they've had some problems over the past 4 years. Somebody was in charge that didn't really like the ocean, or liked the ocean for different reasons, and so like took away some of the protected areas or the sanctuaries that the U.S. had. So that's going to have to come back into place to contribute to that percentage. I think when it comes to a country managing the space, the oceans within their exclusive economic zone, it's a little easier. They can enforce it a little easier because like the US and Canada have a Coast Guard. So they have active duty people who are always going out and it's still tough, but they're surveying marine protected areas, whether it be via satellite, whether it be via boat, via airplane, it doesn't matter. They're actually surveying these areas on a fairly regular basis. There's still challenges involved, but it's still fairly regular basis. When it comes to the high seas outside the country's exclusive economic zone, now we're talking trouble. You're right. There's probably a lot of places that are not really touched a lot by boats, but there are places where they're touched a lot by boats, by fishing vessels, by whalers, by poachers, so forth. But it's hard to figure out where they're going and how long they're staying in there and where they go after. Enforcement on the high seas it's nearly impossible. And I hate to say it, Sea Shepherd can't be everywhere.
Yeah, no.
Because it's so big, right? And even though Sea Shepherd seems to be the only organization that's doing it, they have 7 boats.
Right.
And they can only do so much. And because the UN doesn't really have any boats, and they don't really have any legal sort of action that they can take, enforcement becomes really difficult. So yes, we could actually take on paper and sketch out some, marine protected areas in the high seas, but they mean nothing without enforcement. That's where the paper parks term comes in, where you can still extract and not get punished for it.
Right.
Then within the exclusive economic zone, within each country, you have to convince countries to do it, or the countries themselves have to do it. Their citizens have to convince their governments to do it. But then the problem comes, like, are they going to enforce it? Are they going to put the money and the resources together to enforce it? And when they do enforce it, are the fines going to be big enough to make people deter them from doing illegal things?
Right, because Andrew, what is a fine?
Well, a lot of times a fine is like a couple of $1,000.
But what's it mean?
Or even a slap on the wrist.
A fine is a fee for service. If you've got the money, who cares? I pay the fine.
That's true.
So like
corporations are like that.
Yeah, I was looking at I was out boating the other day on Lake Winnipesaukee, one of our biggest lake here in New Hampshire. And there's an island out there that someone built a house that takes up all the land mass on the island. There is no vegetation left. There's just a house on an island. And I did a little research, and they had paid millions in fines. Happily.
Wow.
They happily paid it because of fee for service. Now, if it was a fine plus there's actually a criminal thing where they're going to jail or something else.
Or they have to alter the house to go back to what it was.
All they have to do is keep paying fines. And those fines will carry on. They'll pay fines for years on this house, but they don't care.
Right.
Because they have throwaway money, and it doesn't matter what the fines are. So you got the dough, fee for service. Yeah. A bigger hurt would be for those big oil companies and stuff would be to get rid of the subsidies and tax breaks they get. Because then that's bigger than a fine. They're happy to pay the fine because that's like bribe money. Sure. Exactly.
Yep. Well, it's like what the Chinese government's actually proposing to do this year is to instead of just fines for illegal fishing when they discover one of their distant fleet boats come back with illegal fish or unreported fish or unregulated fish, then they will they actually fine the captain, but also suspend him for 3 years. So now he has no income and no way of getting income through the fisheries industry. And they'll fire the man. They'll let go of the manager for 3 years as well. So
that
it becomes a really interesting concept, when it comes to there. Now, whether they're going to enforce that is another question.
Well,
but that is part of their new policy.
But you don't need to enforce everything. What you have to do is have enough enforcement where the potential to get, it's like you speed when you drive sometimes, right, Andrew?
Yep.
Busted.
I used to drive. I used to drive more.
Yeah. Now you're getting 3 months to the gallon right now because of lockdowns.
Exactly.
But when you drive, you can speed without getting busted, right?
Yeah.
Because the odds of a cop being there when you're speeding are probably pretty low. But the fact that randomly he could be there is enough to deter most people from speeding all the time. And I think what we need is just have enough of a deterrent where the potential to get caught is high enough where you don't do the things.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. And that's the thing right now. And in my opinion, a lot of the punishment, is not enough to deter people from doing the crime. And just like you said, a fine is just a fee for service. And if people have enough money, they're willing to pay for it. So
don't you wish you had enough money?
Oh man, I don't know. I don't even know if I could do it just from an ethical point of view, but like you said, there's people have different sort of sets of common sense and it becomes, it just becomes relative to what people are willing to get away with or what people are willing to put into place to do what they want. And sometimes, you're bound by the law, but you're also restricted by the law, even if you're on the side of the quote unquote good guys or good people. It just really depends. So I just thought it was an interesting question to go over just to see, if we can do it. Will we get to 30% everywhere globally? I don't know, but I think it is allowing countries to really focus on this. And I think there's more of a focus this time around than there has been in the past. So I'm super excited to
interestingly,
see what happens.
last year, I didn't air this piece, but last year during the lockdown, I interviewed some libertarians in New Hampshire. Libertarian, I don't know if you know the party. It's a political party, basically. They're like...
It's more about the economy than anything else.
It's about their personal. It's very personal. I do what I want, you do what you want. But I asked them how they would handle the oceans, overfishing, conservation, that sort of thing, if we don't have government involvement. And they said that, and I didn't air this because it was just so outlandish, they said you just sell the ocean to anyone who wants it, you divide it up, and you can do whatever you want with your space on the ocean. So if you choose to be a conservationist, then you can conserve that plot of ocean, and not let people, and people can't fish in it. And if you are not, then you can do what you want with your space. And I'm like, God. So you're saying whoever has the most money.
What we've done with land in a lot of places.
Whoever has the most money wins is what you're saying. And they said, but people with money, some of them are conservationists. I'm like, but are enough of them conservationists? And the answer is no.
Yeah, exactly.
Not nearly.
Can you imagine if that would happen? That would be... I would be very afraid for the oceans if that happened. I'm glad it doesn't. But anyway, interesting question. We'd love to hear what you think. If you join us on the Speak Up for Blue Facebook group, you can go speakupforblue.com/group. Let us know what you think. Do you think 30 by 30 will actually happen? Love to hear why you think it would or wouldn't. It's always interesting to have these types of discussions.
Thanks, Andrew. That was fun. Appreciate it. You go to speakupforblue.com and check out all the work that Andrew does up there in Canada. And that's it. Podcast is over. You've wasted a bunch of time when you should have been fishing. Big fat thanks to Andrew Lewin from the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast. Big thank you to Steve Angers from the North Country Angler Fly Shop. Thanks to Wally Pleasant for our theme music. And thanks for Diane's Bath Salts for our news theme. And of course, thanks to Boatsetter, boatsetter.com, for supporting this podcast financially. It makes a big difference. And thank you to all the Patreon subscribers too. Could not do it without all your help. So until next time, follow the code of the fish nerd, spawn early and often. Never trust a free lunch with strings attached, and swim against the current every chance you get.
Whether you're fly fishing in a stream, getting those ankles wet, or deep in the ocean casting nets, fish nerds. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. It's a podcast.
Just for the halibut.
Fried in a basket or broiled in a pan. Eat it raw like you're in Siam. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. Fish nerds. It's a podcast.